Hello, my name is Jonathan, and welcome to the Haystack. So, I wanted to cover this again. The nation's getting tight. It's getting wound tight with all the fighting. And there's a lot of people. I've seen graphics of where people say they initially approved of the immigration law from Trump, and now that's gone down significantly. And that's by design. The whole purpose of these protests is to have agitators within them that create it into a riot for the sole purpose of getting themselves cheap martyrs. So I've detailed that in the CIA document I've already shown. I'll put it on the screen here. The link will be in the video as it was with the other ones, with the past videos. But the whole point of it is to get cheap martyrs for the cause. There is no heightening of the use of force. It's just simply interfering with operations so much that it requires a use of force, and that they want it to be as messy as possible. Now, I don't know why a person would come armed to a peaceful protest where they're shouting for the deaths of ICE and their families. But there's reason for them to be fearful, especially if they see the person is armed and give him lawful commands, which he rejects, and then they get into a confrontation. It's not like Kyle Rittenhouse, where he was hired to go protect a property from, again, leftist rioters burning down another city, again. And then when he came across law enforcement, he had his hands up and turned himself, hey, yeah, you're right. Hey, hands up. Just so you know, look, I'm obviously armed. It's not the same situation. And this guy was carrying a firearm without his ID. Now, that is against the law in Minnesota. It's a misdemeanor. It doesn't necessarily get your rights taken away. It's not a felony, but it's something you should not be doing in the first place. And you definitely don't go pick a fight with federal officers if you're armed. I guarantee you this. I think he was a Border Patrol agent, not ICE. But I guarantee you he is not going, oh, yeah, I got one of those protesters, right? Because it's not Gestapo. It's not Trump's private police. These guys have been working for 22 years doing the same exact job. The only difference is that under Wall's government in Minnesota, he has called for riot. Ever since 2020, it's been riots, riots, riots. There is a common denominator, and it's not ICE. ICE is operating perfectly fine in all other 50 states. They are not operating well where they have had a governor call for violence against them. He pitted the people against federal government and fed them propaganda, which is what we do in other nations as a CIA operation, what you would do for a color revolution. When you want to turn the tables on things, because the idea is, even if it's not bad, you want to make it look bad. And the whole idea is you want to get the reigning regime to look as bad as possible, even calling it Gestapo. It says that in the documents. And that's what Walls has done precisely, is call it Gestapo. The Gestapo does not detain and release you right away. No, they were executing hundreds of thousands of people. Was it 2 million people killed? Jews? That's not happening. And this was not an execution or anything. The guy, you have six law enforcement operators who are fighting with this guy because he's refusing to cooperate, and he's armed in a protest where they're less protesty and more rioty. They know he's armed, and then he's disarmed. Now, we're not sure if the guy heard gun, or I got his gun. What we do know is that they knew he had a gun, and then it was gone. And the guy who opened fire likely thought he must have grabbed it. You want to see too? Mm-hmm. You say hello. Hello. All right, go play. So, had his gun. So he sees that the protester has a gun, and then it's gone. And the guy, he can't see the guy's hands. So you only have seconds, right? You can have, Captain Hindsight can go, well, oh, that's all wrong. You've never been in a use of force. I've actually been in a use of force. You have seconds, not even seconds, less than seconds to act upon your training. And I guarantee he acted upon his training, and he didn't see the gun. And how can they have that clear communication with all these protesters whistling and making as much ruckus as possible? Because they're provoking and trying to disrupt everything. Their goal is to have a cheap martyr, and they achieved it. Congratulations. We have a pretty good martyrs for the Democrat Party and the leftists, because their fraud has been exposed. So what I can tell you about a use of force is that it's investigated like crazy. Every time there's a use of force, it's always investigated. It's gone through with a fine-tooth comb. And the thing is, all depends on who's in charge, too. If Democrats are in charge, regardless of it being justified or not, if it doesn't serve their purposes, their narrative, it's all downhill. On top of that, they care more about the superficial thing, the perception of what happened rather than what actually happened. Whereas Republicans care more about what actually happens than the perception of what happens. So that's the difference, is the PR. So even if it's perfectly justified, the officers in the right, some officers in some jurisdictions would sooner die, take a bullet, and go down than have to get into a position where they're killing somebody. Because one, their life is immediately over, depending on who they're serving under. Because then they're fired, they're gone, they can't work again. And that's going to lead people to some bad, dark areas in their life. And so, might as well bite the bullet. And that's awful, and that's bad. Unfortunately, that's the reality of the situation. That's what happens when you have bad administrators, toxic leaders. This guy, I guarantee you, is beating himself up when he realized that the man was disarmed. And he thought he was armed and just couldn't see the gun anymore and had to act split second, so he relied on his training. But no, in the operations, what usually follows through is you're put in administrative leave, you get counseling, your firearm is taken away, they do ballistics, and they go through everything. It's a huge, huge thing, investigation. But the whole point of these protests and everything is for social persuasion, because they couldn't pass what they wanted to with laws. They couldn't do it through votes. So they have to emotionally upset people. They have to give a perception of something to drive people crazy. The thing is, the use of force hasn't increased. The whole point is to get a greater presence of force. That's why Walz and Fry have directed their people, their law enforcement, to not cooperate with federal law enforcement. Because usually what would happen is you get a detainer, you arrest a criminal alien, someone who's already committed crimes, and you hold them to be deported. That's not happening. Now, recently it looks like President Trump and Walz came to an agreement where they're going to hand over all the criminals that are currently illegal alien criminals, which are currently being held in prisons and jails throughout the state. And so hopefully that's a good start. That's something that should be done in every state. That's the policy for every state. The difference is Democrats are not cooperating with Trump. Shocker, I know. Instead, they want to throw off red herrings and call him, oh, hey, he's a pedophile, he's all that. But first thing is, during those 4 years when Biden was in office, they had even before that, they had the Russia hoax, which has all been proven false. Right now, people are being investigated because they were spying on Republican officials illegally. They fudged justification to spy on them, their political opponents, just like Watergate. So all this stuff is being exposed. The money, the fraud, everything is being exposed. The Gadiantons are being exposed. The devil knows his time is short, and so he's writhing, he's shaking his chains, everything, throwing all the Hail Marys they can, because everything is getting exposed. Light is being shed. And if they had anything on Trump, they wouldn't have to manufacture and fake so much. And it would have been enforced when they tried those 34 counts to try and get him. Even the Attorney General of New York, who ran on the basis of locking up Trump, herself was committing huge, significant real estate fraud. So you see what they're happening is projection of their own fears. No kings, because they want to be kings, right? It's all projection. And this is part of our innate humanness. We want to give up the sin or something bad that we're doing. Usually, the correct way of doing things is you repent and forsake the sin, right? Ancient times, you'd repent, forsake the sin, offer it up into a clean, unblemished lamb. Then Jesus Christ ends up being the ultimate unblemished lamb, right? The ultimate sacrifice. However, there's people who would rather than give up the sin, and they project it onto those who are good, those around them, onto someone else who's not as filthy as them. They cast their sins upon them, but then have no mercy, right? And there's no accountability for themselves, but they're not going to have mercy for putting blame on somebody else either. They're projecting their blame and casting their own sins upon somebody else. It's very clear what is happening. The idea is to get the reigning government to use as much force as possible, so when this other Gadianton government, who tries to usurp everything and does so through emotional and perceived means, so make it look bad, get people's emotions riled up, get people divided, then they come into power. Then there's already used to seeing a large use of force, right? Or at least the presence of a use of force, which is requisite for like the Trump administration right now. They can't just give up and go, oh yeah, well, I guess you're right, we just won't enforce the law like the last administration did. We're just going to give up. You can't do that. You're bound by law. And he ran on the whole platform that this is what we're going to do. That's what we elected him for. So now you got to make it look bad. It doesn't look pretty. It never does. It's not supposed to. They're trying to manipulate you. It's all in the CIA document. So the whole idea is to get people divided. But can't you see he's using them as a Gestapo? Gestapo killed people, tortured people, didn't detain them and let them go right away. We're being bullied into compliance by people who do not want to follow the law. And these immigration laws, by the way, were established by Democrats. It's their own laws, but it doesn't fit their narrative now because it's tied up with all their fraud. It's tied up with, they need all those electoral votes. They need the census to be greater in those concentrated cities so they have more electoral leverage. It's all manipulation. It's all Amalickiah. It's Timu Amalickiah. They seek to poison by degrees and usurp their own nation. That's exactly what it is. And I've seen a couple people like Dan McClellan and others who are hard leftist, very progressive Latter-day Saints. And it is obvious with their politics, with their stances on a few things. To me, that's all Gadian. Because our government is no bigger, our federal spending is no bigger. We've actually just exposed all of the federal spending that it's been going into fake programs to fund Democrats and their illegal immigrant population. But hey, I mean, it's very clear. I don't know how clearer to make it. We're taught this in the Book of Mormon, where we have the documents. We can see with our own eyes what's going on. They just wish to flatter you away with very myopic images of, oh, doesn't this look bad? Oh, what evil, orange man bad at all costs. Everything we faked didn't work. So now we have to literally create bad situations. Even with the Biden administration, they didn't let go of their image of the use of force. That National Guard around the White House stayed there for quite some time. So, yeah, they're trying everything, and we as Latter-day Saints, Christians, people who just believe in right and wrong, we have to recognize that we can't just be swayed so easily with every wind of doctrine and go, oh, because we're meant to be peculiar people. How are we peculiar people if we're constantly always going with every wind of doctrine and whatever the popular theory is at the time? Just look for yourself. Read. And these ICE officers, the Border Patrol, they don't have hate in their hearts. The people calling for their deaths and throwing rocks and ice blocks at them and throwing screws and things, trying to pop their tires and following them and trying to impede them and stop them from catching murderers and criminals and rapists. I mean, we've had a number of U.S. citizens who were raped, tortured, and killed. One lady was burned alive by illegal immigrants. There was no uproar for them. Yet their cries come up from like the dust to the Lord, crying for, hey, what about us? What about us? But these guys want these pretty good Timu cheap martyrs. They literally did their objective. The Democrat leftist leaders want them to die, and that's what happened. Just wanted to add a couple things that I thought of when I was talking to my wife. She was asking my opinion on all this, and so I told her. And I explained it so much better to her than I explained it to you. But I do want to cover a few other things and link it back again to the Book of Mormon. This is Amalickiah. And what we're seeing with the leftist, the Democrat Party, is that they can't win. They can't be king or president. They can't be in charge. So they're going out of their way to seek alliances outside their own nation so that they can come back and gain power in their own nation. They need it for the census numbers. They need it for the electoral votes. And I find it strange that we're just also now learning that, the hospitals aren't seeing so many Somalians die from heart attacks or strokes. They must have extremely good health. But no, they're still getting benefits for people who die. But what happened to the people who die? It reminds me of things that happen in the Book of Mormon, where you have the nation turning inside on itself. It's becoming evil. Imagine everything that's happening in Minnesota. If Walls had won and Kamala had won, and they were now leading the nation, things would be turning. The nation would be turning into Minnesota. Again, the stuff happening in Minnesota with ICE is happening in Minnesota. It's not happening in the 49 other states. Texas, that has far more illegal immigration, far more arrests, far more agents. Not the same issues. I wonder why. Literally everything that's happening in Minnesota is warned about in the Book of Mormon. We're warned about the poisoning by degrees and coming in to take over your own nation, using outside nation and help from outside the nation. Now killing children, okay, so these third world people coming out of Somalia. Let me give you an idea. In Desert Storm, like Black Hawk Down, if you've seen that, this is taking place in Somalia. You have people that are latching bombs to their babies and throwing them off rooftops so the U.S. American forces will catch them and blow up. That's the mindset. I mean, the nation is a nation of pirates. Oh, don't speak negatively, but yeah, there's some good eggs in there. Not all. The culture that is held in Somalia is not an American culture. And so when we let that in here, what we're seeing is death of children. We're seeing, I'm not sure if I could say it, sexual assaults, rapes. We have U.S. citizens that were killed, a lady burned alive. I'm not sure if I mentioned that earlier. But it's a completely different culture. Basically, if they can get away with it, it's allowed. And we've seen how they've done that with fraud. This is everything that was warned about in the Book of Mormon. When Mormon is seeing the fall of his own nation, he's seeing the fall of everything. It's no longer, it's no longer a God-fearing nation. They've given in to everything else and have become just as the Lamanites. And so we're seeing, Lamanites being brought into the nation with a different culture, different ideas, and going to war against ourselves. People are dying, but they're still getting funding. Like these people are disappearing or just never dying. Going into a meat grinder, eating human flesh, sexual assaults on people. That's happening. And this is who leftists are protecting. We were warned about this in the Book of Mormon. It's happening. I don't know why we have to be so willfully ignorant to these things when we're warned to pay attention and to recognize the awful state of things. Because if we fall victim to this psyop and say, oh, it doesn't look that good, I don't like it, guess what? That is the future. Minneapolis is going to spread throughout this nation. It's going to be a riotous nation, and it would fall just like as it did for Mormon and Moroni. That's the end result if you go with the left. So there we are.